السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, today we'll be going over Surah Al-Kafiroon. Last week we went over Surah Al-Kawthar, which meant the great abundance. And Surah Al-Kafiroon is the next surah, surah number 109, 109 in the order of the Quran. And it is the 18th surah in the order of revelation according to Imam Ibn Ashur in his tafsir, that the 18th surah in the order of revelation from when the Prophet started receiving surahs from the angel Jibreel from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So because it's the 18th in the order of revelation, it is a Makki surah, meaning it was revealed before the migration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Medina. So it's one of the earlier Meccan surahs. It's got a couple of names. The first name, Al-Kafiroon, like we mentioned, means those who reject, the rejectors in basic term. And it also has another name which is not commonly known. And that is Al-Muqashqasha. That is Surah Al-Muqashqasha. Maybe because it's a difficult name to pronounce, maybe that's why we don't know it very well. But Al-Muqashqasha, it's one of the names that's attributed to this surah, and it means the curer or the healer, referring to healing the problem of shirk, of associating partners with Allah in worship, of idol worship, of hypocrisy, things like that. Because this surah is basically it's a declaration of independence from any form of idol worship, any form of associating any other type of worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's called the cure for the sickness of shirk, Al-Muqashqasha. The reason for the revelation of this surah, there are a few incidents that are mentioned. They're all related. And all of these took place at varying times, and the Prophet ﷺ was approached over and over again by certain people, trying to make deals with him, trying to get him to stop telling people not to worship the idols and to change their way and so on and so forth. So in one of the incidents, Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, Al-As ibn Wa'il, Al-Aswad ibn Abd Yaghuth, said to Al-Abbas radiallahu anhu, this is the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ who accepted Islam, if your nephew accepts some of our gods, we will accept what he says and believe in his God. So first they tried to approach the Prophet ﷺ through his uncle, his beloved uncle, and told him, look, tell your nephew, if he accepts some of our gods, then we will believe him and will worship his God as well. Now the Arabs at that time, they believed in Allah. They believed that Allah was the creator, they believed He was the one that provided. But they associated other gods with Him in worship. So in part of their dua was Allahumma. And when we started, when we did Surah Al-Fil, the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ made the dua to Allah alone to protect the house, right? He said, this is the house of Allah, oh Allah, you protect this house from the army that was coming. But they associated other gods with him as well. So they asked him, if you tell him to believe in some of our gods, then we will accept his God as well, or believe in his God as well. In another instance, one of the other chiefs of the Quraysh, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah and Umayyah ibn Khalaf, said to the Prophet ﷺ, they approached him one day and they said, we won't leave you alone until you follow our religion and we follow yours. They were trying to make deals with the Prophet ﷺ. So we won't leave you alone until you follow our religion and we will follow yours as well. So if our affair is good, you will have taken your portion of it, and if your affair is good, we will have taken our portion of it. Now this tells you how much belief they actually had in their own system of faith and religion. They're willing to compromise, right? They're willing to compromise. They're willing to give it up. And what they're saying is that, look, let's do this. Let's share in this religion thing. You take some of what we have, we take some of what you have, and if what you have is really true, then we'll get some benefit, and if what we have is really true, you're going to get some benefit. So they weren't even certain of their own beliefs, right? These are deductions you can make from their statements. They weren't even certain of their own religion, whether or not this is true. They were willing to compromise it as well. And in the third instance that's mentioned here, it was said to the Prophet ﷺ, we will worship your God for a year, meaning we'll worship Allah alone for 1 year, and then next year, we all worship our gods. Right? So let's compromise this way. 1 year we worship Allah, the next year we worship Lat and Uzza and all these other gods that they had. So this just goes to show you the level of their own faith, the level of their certainty in their own religion. They're willing to compromise. So they're not really concerned about religion, they're concerned about power, about holding on to influence and all these kinds of things. But the Prophet ﷺ, after all of this surah was revealed to him, Surah Al-Kafiroon, and he went and he spoke this, he said what Allah spoke, because the surah starts with the word Qul. It's one of the 4 surahs, one of the 5 surahs that start with the word Qul. Do you know the surahs, by the way, that start with the word Qul? What are they? Al-Kafiroon, this one. Al-Ikhlas, Qul Huwallahu Ahad. And then قل أعوذ برب الفلق, and قل أعوذ برب الناس. There's one more. This one's hard one. There's one more surah that starts with the word قل. قل أوحي إلي أنه استمع نفر من الجن. Surah Al-Jinn. Surah Al-Jinn starts with قل. Say it has been revealed to me that a group of the jinn heard the Quran. So mashallah, we should get him a reward, inshallah. So these are the 5 surahs that begin with the word قل. So the Prophet ﷺ actually went and said it, and he said it like it was revealed to him with the word قل. Right? قل, say he is Allah the one, or say Ya ayyuhal kafirun. So the Prophet ﷺ is commanded, and he went and he spoke this to the Quraysh in their gatherings as well. We'll get to that in a second, inshallah. Some of the virtues of this surah, some of the virtues that are attached to this surah. Hassan, can you get the remote? They can make it a little bigger so they can see. Some of the virtues that are attached to this surah. There's a hadith narrated عن فروة بن نوفل أنه أتى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله علمني شيء أقوله إذا أويت إلى فراشي قال اقرأ قل يا أيها الكافرون فإنها براءة من الشرك. And this is narrated by Imam At-Tirmidhi. Just to make it better to see. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he was asked, by Farwa ibn Nawfal radiallahu anhu, that tell me something that when I go to bed I can say it. Tell me something that will benefit me when I go to bed. So he told him, recite Surah Al-Kafirron. Recite this surah because it is a cure from shirk. So one of the names we mentioned, Muqashqasha al-Bara'a, it is a cure from shirk, something that will get rid of shirk, or shirk means associating partners with Allah. Whether it's a God, whether it's yourself, whether it's anything, associating partners with Allah. So reciting it when you go to bed is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Also the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited this surah in one of the 2 raka'at of tawaf. So whenever he would make the tawaf, the circumambulation around the Kaaba, and then you pray 2 raka'at as an extra prayer, right? Behind what? Behind Maqam Ibrahim. So when one of the raka'at he would read, he was heard reading this surah, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. And also the Prophet ﷺ recited this surah in the sunnah prayer of the Fajr. So he recited قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ in the 2 raka'at of sunnah for Fajr. This is something he was known to do, not required from anyone to do, but it's something that has been narrated from him that he used to do and he was heard doing. So this is a surah that he would recite often. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So getting into the surah, it's made up of 6 ayat. The first ayat says قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Basically translated as say, O you all that reject. O you who reject, and disbelieve is another one that the word kafir means also disbeliever. We'll get into that in a second, inshallah. So the first opening verse of this surah is calling them out by the title Al-Kafirun, right? Al-Kafirun. And again, it's made as a humiliation for them. Number one, they did not like being called those who reject. The Prophet ﷺ knew that. They did not like being called Al-Kafirun. And the Prophet ﷺ was also showing them his bravery by going in open and calling them Ya ayyuhal kafirun, right? Because they tried to make a deal with him, we'll worship your God if you worship our gods and things like that. But he goes to them and says, Ya ayyuhal kafirun, O you who reject. And the word kufr, which the word kafir comes from, it literally in the Arabic language means to cover up. To cover up. It's been used to refer to farmers. Kufar has been used to refer to farmers because they take the seed, they put it in the ground, and they cover it up. Right? So it's linguistically it means to cover something up. So when you understand what that means, a kafir is somebody who understands that this is the truth, yet he covers it up. He does not want to expose that he knows that this is the truth. And there's 4 types of kufr. 4 types of kufr that the scholars describe. The kufr of denial, meaning the rejection in the sense of denial, meaning you just reject the fact that this is true. You just reject completely, this cannot be true. That's one form of kufr. Other is refusal. Refusal to accept the truth, even though you realize it's there, but refusal to accept it. A third form is opposition, meaning you know it's true, but you're going to oppose it anyway. And this existed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, especially when he went to Medina. There were people, there was a sahabiya, a female companion of the Prophet ﷺ, whose father was one of the chiefs of one of the Jewish tribes in Medina. And she heard him, she narrates that she heard him saying, we know that he is the true prophet that's mentioned in our scriptures, but he says, by Allah, I will oppose him. I will oppose him because he did not come from the Bani Israel, the children of Israel. So opposition, knowing that it's the truth and opposing it, and also hypocrisy, covering it up, pretending to be a Muslim when in reality you are not. These are the types of kufr that exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling them out by this name, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. And also the word qul in the beginning. The word say, why is it included in the surah? The Prophet ﷺ was commanded to say all of the Quran, but why specifically in these 5 surahs, and this one in particular as well, is he commanded to start it with the word say. Now, these people came to the Prophet ﷺ with a proposition, right? That you worship our gods, we worship your God. And this is the reply coming not from the Prophet ﷺ, right? The Prophet ﷺ just waited. He said, let me wait for what Allah says. So Allah is giving him the message, and he is saying the message as Allah has sent it. Meaning he's saying, this is not coming from me, this is coming from Allah himself. And he has told me, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Allah is telling me to say, Ya you, O you who reject, O you who reject. Also, we try to do this every time, the connection of the previous surah to this surah. Right? Surah Al-Kawthar ended with the word, إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ. Your enemy is the one who is abtar. Because they call the Prophet ﷺ abtar, which meant that he is cut off. He has no male offspring, and he is not going to be remembered after he dies. That's what they called him. They called him abtar. And Allah says at the end of that surah, He says, إِنَّ شَانِئَكَ هُوَ الْأَبْتَرُ. Your enemy is the one who is cut off, and He is saying that he's cut off from all types of good. And in addition to that, as a response to that as well, Allah Azza wa Jalla is also giving them another title. Right? So they dared to call the Prophet of Allah ﷺ names, and so Allah is calling them a name. Right? It's kind of a relationship. But the name they called the Prophet ﷺ was not true. Right? They called him abtar, meaning you're cut off, you're not going to have any remembrance after you die. And Allah calls him by Al-Kafiroon. He labels them Al-Kafirron, meaning he's giving them a name, a title. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. You call the Prophet ﷺ abtar, I'm calling you Al-Kafirun, those who reject. So Allah is also responding in defense of the Prophet ﷺ as well, as kind of the connection between the two surahs as well. So the surah begins with him calling out to the Kafirun, so there's a message to give. And what is that message? The next 2 ayat they say, لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. That I do not worship what you worship. Right? I do not worship what you worship, and nor are you worshippers of what I worship. Now the next 2 ayat, I'll just go to them quickly, are very similar. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. Right? Nor will I ever be a worshipper of what you worship, nor will you ever be worshippers of what I worship. So all of that sounds very similar. Right? All of that sounds very similar. But just to go back to these 2. I do not worship what you worship, meaning right now. You've come to me with this proposal of, hey, let's, we worship your gods for a year, you worship our gods for a year. Right? He's saying, I do not even worship your gods. This is not something I do. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. And you do not worship my God. You do not worship Allah. Right? You do not worship that who I worship. I worship Allah and you don't. Because you associate partners with Him, that's not worship. That is not worship. So even though they believed in Allah, even though they knew He was the Creator, even though they knew He was the one that provided, He's saying you are not worshiping Allah, you're not being a true slave to Allah because you're mixing it with other people. An interesting point here, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ and مَا أَعْبُدُ. The Arabic language, the way it's used, he's saying, I don't worship what you worship, which makes sense, the idols are things. And he's saying, nor do you worship what I worship, instead of saying who I worship. Right? So in Arabic it's a little bit, if you're studying Arabic, what you will learn is the word man is for who, is for aqil, is for the one that is living and reasoning and a living thinking being. Right? Then the word man is used. And the word ma is used, what? For غير aqil, meaning not non-living things or things that don't rationalize and think. But here the word ma is used, what I worship. Right? So if you study just Arabic in the sense of today, like modern standard Arabic, you'll be told that man is for who and ma is for what. Right? So why is what here used instead of who when it's referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And just to have a little note here, I left it in Arabic, I don't know if I was going to cover it. But the word ma in the classical Islamic Arabic, according to Ibn Ashur, can be used for both living and non-living. Right? Can be used for both intellectual and non-intellectual things or beings. So it makes perfectly fine sense that it's referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in what I worship. And that is the correct translation, with what I worship. And also the Arabs used to use it in reference to living things, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, like the saying, Subhana ma sabbaha ar-ra'du bihamdi. Right? Glorified is the one who the lightning is praising Him. Right? Is praising Him. But the word ma is used instead of man, meaning the word what is used instead of who. So it's just important, when you see that in translation, it might throw you off. Why is the Prophet ﷺ being told to refer to Allah as what instead of who? In Arabic, it can go either way for a living and non-living thing. So the Prophet ﷺ says, La a'budu ma ta'budun. The word abd here is important to understand. I don't worship, as we commonly translate it. Abd, literally, it refers to a slave. Somebody that is owned, right? That's what the slaves were called as well. And it also refers to devoting yourself. Devoting yourself with adoration, with some kind of love to somebody else. It also has other meanings in the Arabic language, but we use it commonly to mean worship, but worship in the sense that I am completely under the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am owned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We are owned by Allah. That's why he said Malik Yawmi. He's the Malik, he is the owner, the master, and we are the Abd, we are the slaves. And he's saying, I don't enslave myself. I don't completely submit myself to what you submit yourself to the idols that you worship. And these two phrases are referring, like I said, to the current situation. So the Prophet is saying here, right now, I don't worship what you worship, and you don't worship what I worship. That's what's happening right now. And in the next two, he says, وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ. The structure of this one is a little bit different, but the fifth ayah is the exact same as the third ayah. Right? وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدْ, nor are you worshippers of what I worship. But the sense that it's giving in the meaning is a little different. So وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدْتُمْ, nor will I be a worshipper, nor will I ever be a worshipper of what you worship. When you go from the verb to the noun in Arabic, the noun abid, a worshipper, has a sense of continuity to it, meaning from now until even in the future. So that's a slight difference in this ayah. So he's basically saying, no, nor will I ever be a worshipper of what you worship, meaning I'm never going to accept your idols. And then the fifth ayah, which is the same as the third, follows the meaning of the fourth, which is وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدْ, nor will you ever be worshippers of what I worship. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling these specific people from Quraysh, you are not going to ever accept Islam. You are not going to even accept Islam. And he was told this by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he is going back and telling this to them. And it happened that they all died in various situations. Some of them died in the battles of Badr, in other battles. Some of them died by natural causes in Mecca. But all of these people died and they never accepted Islam. It's something which we call Dalalatun Nubuwah. It's the sign of the prophethood of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That he told them to their faces. And all they had to do was even pretend to say, I accept Islam. And they would have proved him wrong. They never even did that. Right? They could have just pretended and said, you know what, I accept Islam. I believe in Allah and His Messenger. They could have faked it, right, for the sake of the people. But they didn't even do that. They died as people who never accepted Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling them here, you will never accept. You will never accept. And he's not telling them that as a curse. He's telling them that because Allah knows. Allah knows the future, He knows the past, He knows the present. So He knows that they're not going to accept, and He informed the Prophet ﷺ that they're not going to accept. And because they're coming and trying to make these deals, Allah even informs them, this is going to be your end. You're not going to accept. And He knows this. And the Prophet ﷺ goes and he tells them this in front of everyone. He says, I will never worship what you worship, and guess what? You also are never going to worship that which I worship. You're never going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And these two verses are referring to the future circumstance, meaning in the future, it's not going to be this way. And the Prophet ﷺ is also, sorry, I already mentioned this point, the Prophet ﷺ is telling some specific people that they will never be believers because Allah revealed it to them. And like we said, all of these people died without ever accepting Islam. Without ever accepting. This is Al-As ibn Wa'il, Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, all of these people, the chiefs of the Quraysh. And these were the people the Prophet ﷺ was very active in trying to get them to accept Islam. So it was also kind of a shock to the Prophet ﷺ, because these were the chiefs, the leaders. So if you could get them to accept, then the people that followed them would also accept. They would see it as an example that their leaders are accepting the message. So even for the Prophet ﷺ, this was shocking news, that these guys are not going to accept Islam. Meaning he has to work hard now on everybody else. He has to really try to get to every single person, because these people are not going to ever accept Islam. And then the last ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. For you is your deen, and for me is my deen. Right? So what does the word deen mean? And we use it a lot, and it's used for many different meanings. It came up in Surah Al-Fatiha, Maliki Yawm al-Din, the owner of the day of deen. And there we said it meant recompense, jaza, meaning the day of when you get paid back for what you did, the day of recompense. Here, the deen is referring to what you would possibly translate as religion, right? Religion in English usually just means a group of beliefs, or a set of beliefs that certain people abide by, right? But in the Arabic and the Islamic terminology, deen, it means it's a creed, it's a belief system that one holds on to firmly, and his or her actions are in accordance with it. So there's two parts to the word deen. When you say this is my deen, this is my religion, you're saying I believe in it and I practice it. I believe in it and I practice it. Because one of the things we said about kufr was that you know it's the truth, but you refuse to act upon it, right? You refuse it. You refuse to act upon it. So this is one of the forms of kufr, which is opposite of belief. So deen and acceptance is you accept the belief system and you act in accordance to it. So that's why we call it a way of life, right? A set of beliefs and a way of life. It has to do with both. And this is a conclusion from all the previous statements. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, I don't worship what you worship, you don't worship what I worship, I'll never worship what you worship, and guess what? You're never going to end up accepting, you're never going to worship what I worship. So what's the conclusion? لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. For you is your way, meaning it's not going to, I'm not going to accept it ever. So you have your way and it has nothing to do with me. وَلِيَ دِينِ, and I have my deen, and you have no portion in it. You have no portion in it. There's a interesting statement that a lot of scholars mention, and we use this statement sometimes thinking that it's a statement of tolerance, right? So basically he says, oh, it's okay, lakum dinukum waliya din, right? For him is his religion, for me is my religion. It's not a statement of tolerance. The way it's revealed, the way the Prophet is using it, it's not a statement of tolerance, right? Yes, Islam is tolerant of other people's beliefs, but here the statement is not being used for in a tolerant way that you do whatever you want, I do whatever I want. It's being used in the sense that I'm going to continue to preach the truth, I'm going to continue to act on the truth, and you, if you reject it, you have no portion in the truth, right? You're not accepting the truth. So it's not used in a friendly manner. It's basically used, it's like a declaration, like I said, a declaration of independence. I have nothing to do with your set of beliefs because they are not the truth. And I am going to hold on to my set of beliefs because they are the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So stating that your way belongs to you and that it will never cross over to me and vice versa, that's the message that's being delivered here. So from beginning to end, the Prophet ﷺ is being told to deliver a very stern message in the early Meccan period to the chiefs of Quraysh who are trying to make a deal with him to calm things down and say, you know what, he's one of us, he also believes in Allah, we believe in Allah, so let's try to strike a deal here and let's get this thing settled. So they're trying to go and make these deals, worship your God for 1 year, you worship our gods for 1 year. You know, they're going through his uncle Abbas, trying to get him to convince or so on and so forth. So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't himself respond. He would just say, Ma'adallah, and ushrika bihi. Like, I seek refuge in Allah that I would ever associate partners with him. But then Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed the surah, and he went to the gathering of the Quraysh, maybe around the Kaaba, and he spoke it to them in public, which is a very powerful thing. In the early Meccan period, he doesn't have much support. He's not, in a situation where, like he was in Medina, where the Muslims were in large numbers and they had armies. He goes to them, and it's a very brave act, and he calls them by a name that makes them angry. He calls them Al-Kafiroon, right? And he's saying, Allah said this, not me. Right? قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, Allah tells me to say, O you who disbelieve, O you who reject. Right? And he calls them out by this. So it also shows us that at times, depending on the situation, sometimes we need to be very straightforward. Right? Sometimes we need to be a little bit firm. Sometimes we need to be a little bit stern and state that, this is not what I believe. I don't accept this in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes we become too relaxed when we become accepting of other people. Yes, we accept other people. We recognize that they have their own belief systems. We have our own belief systems. But at the same time, we don't want to fall or cross the line of ever making them think like we accept what it is that they believe, or that it's okay. Right? Because committing shirk with Allah, associating partners with Allah is not okay. The Quran came down to abolish it. So we have to understand that there is a time when you have to be firm and say, this is not what I believe. Right? As a person or of any other religion or faith, you're a human being, you're my brother, that's fine. But as a belief system, as a religion, this is not something I have anything to do with, and you have nothing to do with. If you stay upon this, then you have nothing to do with the truth that has been revealed to the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with this, we'll finish with Al-Kafiroon, inshallah. Next week will be Surah Al-Nasr, the other short surah, inshallah. We'll finish the last 10 surahs first, and then we'll go to the rest of the Quran, inshallah. If there are any questions or comments, you take them now. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
So basically, what I understood, I'm sorry I joined towards late, but reading in the past, it has a connotation that when it comes to your deen, basically the oneness of Allah, there is no compromise, and that's when it made it clear that this is what it is, take it or leave it.
Yes. So, and that's a very important thing. So the Prophet ﷺ was he's being told in a very strong message that this is where your stance is. That there is absolutely no compromise whatsoever in this aspect, in the aspect of the belief of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that's the message that was sent to all the prophets. And that's the one thing people kept messing up with. right? They kept associating partners with Allah and creating other objects of worship and things like that. So this surah is here until the end of time, and to show us that no, there's absolutely no way that we can ever compromise to any other belief system that goes against Tawheed. Like, there's absolutely no way, because the Prophet ﷺ said it, and it's in the Quran. So even though he said it for specific people, telling them that you will never believe, it's still in the Quran because it's still recited until the end of time. Why? Because that's also a lesson for us.
Right.
That whenever we get confronted with, okay, well, you know what, if maybe you Muslims do believe some of what we believe, then we'll treat you better, right? Maybe if you start, because you have places in this world where, alhamdulillah, here we're free, but you have places in the world where they're told, no, you have to change, you should eat pork.
Right.
If you eat pork, then we'll treat you better, right? If you take off the hijab for the women, then we'll treat you better, right? If you just stop praying, then we'll so there are places where this happens. So it just shows us that, no, there's absolutely no compromise when it comes to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No compromise whatsoever. Jazakallah khair. Any other comments, inshallah?
Another comments about, that's also I heard Mr. Nawab explain about use of what instead of how, instead of who.
Yeah.
Because if you say who, then it's Allah. But if you say what, it's actually refer to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So
Yeah.
what you worship, like what they worship, is
Yeah.
like cannot do anything. Their attributes are really poor.
Exactly.
But
And
what I worship, that's Allah. What is Allah?
Yeah.
Allah is Al-Qawi, Al-Aziz. All these attributes comes in the picture. So he's also in
The
this
description of his
surah,
attributes.
description of Allah.
yeah, alhamdulillah. And again, there's the scholars, when they go into the linguistics of the Quran, mashallah, they go into very, very deep things. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for that. Thank you. That it's a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His attributes, all of His attributes. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Inshallah.
So this is like the second time I know that this happened when Allah says something about somebody, like when he's on the surah about Abu Lahab, when he was still alive, but we have a chance one day to maybe change, but it won't happen, and it never happened. These things came down when he was alive, so this further proof
Yeah, so
that-
2 weeks from now we'll be doing the Surah Al-Lahab, inshallah. That's Surah Al-Masad, which Abu Lahab is mentioned. So that's also similar to what's happening here, that he's mentioned specifically in the Quran. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab, right? His name, by name he's mentioned in the Quran. And again, all he had to do was even pretend to accept Islam, right? But he never did. He remained that kafir until the end of time, just like these people that were trying to make deals with the Prophet ﷺ. And he came and told them early on in Makkah, by the way. It's the 18th surah to be revealed, early on in Makkah, that you are not going to believe. Right? So this was years, they had years and years to even think of trying to fool the Prophet, fool the Muslims, or to create this kind of problem. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He makes a statement, it's true. And there's no one, no matter what they try to do, that to change it. Yeah.
So, of course, we call kafir like as a non-believer,
Yeah.
right? So, and you said when Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam called upon them by the name Kafiroon, that they did not like that name. So, back then, what it actually meant that they did not like it?
Well, it's a negative, so it means you're rejecting something. It means you're denying the truth.
Okay.
So it's not something they want to be attributed to.
Okay.
Right? So when you call them by that, then they obviously take a defensive position that, oh, so we're the ones that are rejected. So it's basically, telling them that I am right, you're wrong.
Oh, I see.
Right? So in the Quran, Allah uses the word Ya ayyuhalladhina or alladhina kafaru, and then He gives something with it. So kafaru billahi, they disbelieve in Allah, they disbelieve in His signs, they disbelieve in His book. But here it's just the title, Al-Kafirron. There's not mention of what they disbelieve in. They disbelieve in all of that. They reject everything that the Prophet ﷺ has come with. So the word in and of itself, it has a negative connotation in the fact that you're rejecting what is true. You're denying or covering up what is true. So they did not like to be obviously called the,
Right.
people who were not accepting the truth. Yeah. Jazakallah khair. Anything else, inshallah?
So I maybe missed the point. I was saying sorry about this. What we mentioned about lakum dinukum waliyadin, it means about the aqidah and the oneness of Allah, or by all the aspect of life and application of life.
Yeah, so the word deen, we define the word deen that it's not just the aqidah, it's not just the belief, but it's also the practice, the action. So Imam Taha ibn Ashur, he mentioned that it's a belief system and actions that you are acting in accordance with that system. So a deen is a full, like we say, way of life and a belief system. So I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I also do what He says. I pray when He tells me to pray, I fast when He tells me to fast. So the actions are very related with the word deen.
But now we understand that was at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Now we are living in this land,
No.
and you have seen the unbelievers, the different way of thinking, the Christian, the Jews, maybe some the worship of something else, the atheists or etc.
No.
How should we deal with them when we are believed? Should we tell them up their face, or should we
Yeah.
tell how can we act with them? Sometimes if you have your colleague at your work and they might have some, what do you call it, a party
Yeah.
for the graduation or celebration, etc. They might invite you and they have beautiful pork there and nice thing there.
Yeah. So alhamdulillah.
So how we have, no, this is really very important question. Not I'm just like to know, and everybody should know how you should act in such a manner like this.
No. So Allah
Should you
subhanahu wa
tell
ta'ala
them,
says.
no, I am really against you, you are so and so, you should so and so, or you will come like the Jews used to do. They used to forbid them one day before, and the next day they used to sit and eat with them.
Yeah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That in the example of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for you is the best example, the most beautiful example. So here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is dealing with the likes of Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, Al-As ibn Wa'il. These people were not like the co-workers, right, that you have. These people were people that were opposing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, calling him names, degrading him in public. So it's setting an example, how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with people who were not behaving like this and how he dealt with people who were behaving like this. So people who are opposing you, degrading you in public, and going around and calling you names and trying to get people to think you're someone else, obviously the way you're going to deal with them is different than the way you're going to deal with people who don't know you very well or are not familiar with what you're doing. So you have to, the surah is not telling us go to every single person who disbelieves and say, Ya ayyuhal kafirun, or you who disbelieve, right? It's obviously the likes of the people that were publicly degrading the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ and behaving in that manner of enmity, right? They were showing openly enmity to the Prophet ﷺ. So with them, yes, you have to be stern and fair and say, look, you don't accept what I accept, right? This is who you are, this is what you are. But with people different people, the Prophet ﷺ didn't go to everyone and call them like this, right? So with other people, he would go to them, he would go to their houses, knock on their doors, be polite, answer their call. We have the example of the woman who would throw trash, right, in front of the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And when she was sick, he went and visited her to see what was happening, right? We have these examples of how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with other people who didn't publicly degrade him, right? But they were still opposing him and things like that. So we have to be wise in the sense that, yes, when we use words like these, we have to use them with the right types of people, right? We have to be firm with the right types of people. And the Prophet ﷺ himself, by his nature, he was very soft. He was very lenient. He was very, rahim, ra'uf. He was very ra'uf. He was very, kind and merciful in nature. So even, Allah sometimes had to tell him to be, strict and firm with certain types of people. That's why you see those kinds of ayat in the Quran. But yes, not with everybody. Please don't go to your co-worker and start saying, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. Ya ayyuhan nas is better, right? Oh, mankind, right? Allah calls you. So Allah uses these different ayat in the Quran. Ya ayyuhan nas. Worship Allah, the one who created you, and those who came before you. So we have these different examples in the Quran, depending on the different types of people that you have to deal with. Jazakallah khair.
No, the question, so how do you deal when you are invited to such a
okay.
like this? The first surprise, you might be surprised, it happens with me a lot. We have a meeting, dental meeting, whatever. The first surprise, the woman come, how do you? And she starts putting her hand, she wants to shake your hand. And sometimes you feel you have to, you don't want to make her upset, and at the same time, you are not allowed to. So what the criteria for all of us to learn, how can we deal with them in a beautiful manner, not to let them, feel offended or to hate you. Look, okay, that's what we hear from TV.
No. So my advice for that is be honest and be polite. And this happens with me all the time as well, especially the handshaking thing, right? So being honest and being polite, it always works, alhamdulillah. And I've had one instance where someone came back and said, why didn't you do this? But after a little bit of explanation, they understood. But if you're honest and you're polite, it's the best way to handle it. So
regarding what you say, about going to parties where they might be serving alcohol, there's a very good friend actually you might know, my brother Usman, he comes here often. And he says that he has office parties quite often, and every time, either somebody's house or something, they're always serving alcohol. So what he normally does is he goes to their house 15 minutes before, pays his respect, if there's any present or something, he takes them, and then he excuses himself and leaves before the party even starts.
That's
he
wise.
just doesn't
That's
even
wise.
put himself.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they just for that act, they respect him even more.
That's wise. That's wisdom, mashallah. That's good. So not just completely not going, but going and at least, before
Yeah.
the party even starts.
Exactly.
That's great advice for future people, inshallah. Barakallah fi, jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
جزاكم الله خير.